Eleanor Vance was a woman who calculated risk for a living. As the CEO of a Midwestern hedge fund, she routinely negotiated mergers that made senior partners sweat through their custom suits. She was used to walking into a room and owning it, but standing on the cracked pavement of an alleyway in downtown Chicago on a Tuesday morning, watching her 7-year-old son, Eleanor felt a kind of terrifying helplessness she couldn't strategize her way out of. Her son, Leo, hadn't spoken a full sentence to a stranger in over 2 years. The specialists, and there had been many of them, at $300 an hour, called it severe selective mutism, brought on by severe anxiety. He didn't just stay quiet. He retreated. If a stranger approached him too quickly, or if a room was too loud, Leo would completely shut down, sometimes lashing out, throwing things, breaking down into full-blown panic attacks. Eleanor had spent the last 2 years wrapping him in bubble wrap, managing his environment with the same ruthless efficiency she applied to her portfolios. That morning, her primary nanny had called in sick with the flu, and her backup was out of town. Eleanor had a mandatory site visit for a new commercial acquisition, so she brought Leo along. Equipped with his noise-canceling headphones and a tablet, she turned her back for exactly 45 seconds to sign a compliance form. When she turned back, the heavy glass doors of the lobby were swinging shut, and Leo was gone. Her heart hit her ribs like a hammer. She sprinted out onto the sidewalk, scanning the gray, hurried street. She spotted his bright yellow jacket, ducking into a narrow gap between 2 high-rise buildings, an empty lot she assumed was just a dumping ground for local construction crews. She ran down the alley, her heels clicking aggressively against the concrete, ready to scoop him up and deal with the inevitable meltdown. But when she rounded the corner, she froze. The lot wasn't a dumping ground. It was a functioning, meticulously maintained urban eco-farm. There were elevated wooden planters bursting with winter greens, a complex rainwater harvesting system, and in the center, a large, deeply excavated koi pond, built into the concrete foundation of a demolished building. And there was Leo. He wasn't wearing his headphones. He wasn't crying. He was sitting on a wooden crate, right at the edge of the water, leaning forward. Beside him sat a man Eleanor had never seen before. He looked to be in his late 30s, wearing faded canvas work pants, a thick thermal shirt, and boots that had seen years of real labor. He had a small bucket of fish feed in his lap. Before we go any further, if you appreciate stories about real people finding strength in unexpected places, take a second to subscribe to the channel. We share stories like this every week, and having you here means a lot. Eleanor held her breath, terrified that her sudden appearance would break the spell. She stayed hidden behind a stack of cedar planks, watching. The man wasn't hovering over Leo. He wasn't trying to force eye contact, and he wasn't asking him how he felt. The two things therapists always did that made Leo shut down instantly. The man was just sitting there, completely comfortable in the silence, tossing a pellet of food into the water every few seconds. The big one with the orange spot on his head, the man said, his voice low, steady, and entirely unbothered. That's Barnaby. He's old. He moves slow. So you have to throw the food a little closer to him, or the young guys steal it. Leo watched the water intently, slowly, with a shaky hand. Leo reached into the bucket on the man's lap, took a single pellet, and tossed it. It landed perfectly in front of the large orange koi. Good throw, the man said simply. He didn't make a big deal out of it. He didn't praise Leo like a toddler. He just stated a fact. And then, a miracle happened. A quiet, impossible miracle. Does he ever get cold? Leo asked. His voice was small, but it was clear. A full, spontaneous sentence. Eleanor pressed her hand against her mouth. Her eyes stung. She hadn't heard her son ask a question out of simple curiosity in 2 years. Nah, the man replied, adjusting his cap. They slow down in the winter. They go into a kind of deep sleep at the bottom where the water's warmer. They just need things to stay quiet and clean. Kind of like us, right? Leo nodded slowly. I like quiet. Me too, kid, the man said. If you are watching this right now, and you know what it feels like to face an uphill battle, whether it's with your family, your career, or your own mind, I want you to make a commitment right here. Go to the comments and type, I choose to stand my ground. Write it down like a promise to yourself. Let it be your declaration today. Eleanor finally stepped out from behind the wood. The man noticed her immediately. He didn't look startled. He just subtly shifted his weight, putting himself slightly between the sudden movement and the child. A protective instinct that was so natural, it caught Eleanor off guard. Mom, Leo said, looking up. He didn't look anxious. He looked anchored. This is Arthur. He builds things. I can see that, Eleanor said, keeping her voice soft. She approached the pond. I'm Eleanor. Thank you for keeping an eye on him. I turned my back for a second and he wandered off. No harm done, Arthur said, standing up. He wiped his hands on a rag from his back pocket. Up close, he had a calm, weathered face and sharp, intelligent eyes. He's got a good eye for the water. Not everybody knows how to just sit and watch. Eleanor reached into her designer handbag, pulling out a sleek leather wallet. I really want to compensate you for your time. And for the fish food, please. She pulled out $200 bills. Arthur looked at the money, then looked at Eleanor. There was no anger in his face, just a mild, amused understanding of who she was and how she operated. Put your money away, Eleanor, he said gently. The kid kept me company. You can't buy a good quiet morning. He said it with such absolute self-respect that Eleanor felt a sudden, rare flash of embarrassment. She quietly slid the money back into her purse. Before she could apologize, the metal gate at the front of the alley rattled loudly. 3 men walked in. 2 were wearing high-vis construction vests, and the man leading them was in a sharp, tailored gray suit that cost more than Arthur's entire farm setup. Arthur's posture changed. He didn't tense up, but a cold, heavy stillness settled over him. The man in the suit didn't even look at Eleanor or Leo. He walked straight up to the edge of the pond, looking around with open disgust. Arthur, the suit said, checking his luxury watch. I told you I'd be back by noon. My patience is officially gone. Vanguard Holdings owns the perimeter. We have the city permits. You have until 6 a.m. Friday to drain this mosquito pit and clear out your scrap wood, or my bulldozers are going to do it for you. Eleanor instinctively pulled Leo behind her. She knew men like this. She dealt with them every day. They were bullies who hid behind zoning laws and corporate retainers. Arthur didn't yell. He didn't look intimidated. He calmly picked up a clipboard resting on a nearby barrel. You don't have the geological permits, Davis, Arthur said, his voice deadpan. You pushed the zoning through, sure, but you didn't run the deep soil tests. Davis laughed, a sharp, condescending sound. I don't need a soil lecture from a guy playing farmer in a dirty alley. We have a $50 million parking structure breaking ground on Monday. You have a lease that expired 2 weeks ago. It's over. Pack it up. If you've ever had someone look down on you, assume you were weak just because you didn't wear a fancy suit or carry a loud title. You know exactly how this feels. Drop down to the comments right now and type, I choose to stand my ground. Show them that true strength doesn't need to shout. Davis tossed a folded legal notice onto the dirt near Arthur's boots. Friday, Arthur. Or we pave right over those stupid fish. He turned and walked out, his crew trailing behind him. Eleanor looked at Arthur, expecting to see defeat, panic, or rage. Instead, Arthur just calmly picked up the paper, folded it, and put it in his pocket. He looked back at the water. Are they going to hurt Barnaby? Leo asked, his small hands gripping Eleanor's coat tightly. Arthur crouched down so he was eye level with the boy. He smiled. And it was a real, solid smile. Nobody is paving over Barnaby, Leo, Arthur said. I promise you that. Eleanor didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen island with a glass of water, watching the city lights. Leo was upstairs, sleeping soundly, for the first time in months. Before bed, he had asked if they could go back and see Barnaby the fish. He had asked it clearly, looking right into her eyes. She couldn't stop thinking about the alleyway. She couldn't stop thinking about a man who didn't raise his voice, when everything he built was threatened. Arthur had mentioned deep soil tests. People like Davis didn't skip deep soil tests unless they knew exactly what those tests would find. Eleanor opened her laptop. She was a hedge fund CEO. Finding buried information was literally what she did for a living. By 3 a.m., she had pulled the public zoning records for Vanguard Holdings' new parking structure. By 4 a.m., she had cross-referenced the land surveys with historical city blueprints. When she finally saw it, the sheer negligence of it made her blood run cold. The alleyway wasn't just an empty lot. It sat directly over a major subterranean aquifer nexus. Arthur's deep excavation pond wasn't just a fish tank. It was acting as a critical pressure release valve for the entire block's groundwater. If Vanguard Holdings poured 50,000 tons of concrete over that specific weak point, without proper drainage engineering, the water would have nowhere to go. Within a year, the foundation of the elementary school 1 street over would begin to rot. Within 2 years, it would collapse. Vanguard knew it. Their internal geological report had flagged it. But fixing it would have cost them an extra $10 million and delayed the project by a year. So, they buried the report, fast-tracked the zoning, and sent a suit like Davis to bully a guy in an alley. They thought Arthur was just a nobody. They thought nobody would care. If you are listening to this, and you refuse to let bullies get away with stepping on the little guy, go to the comments right now. Type, "I choose to stand my ground." Let's flood the comments with people who still believe in doing the right thing. Friday morning arrived with a bitter, biting wind. At 5:45 a.m., 3 heavy bulldozers were idling at the mouth of the alley. The diesel exhaust hung thick in the cold air. Davis stood near the front gate, holding a cup of premium coffee, looking exceptionally pleased with himself. Arthur was standing on the other side of the chain-link fence. He was wearing the same canvas jacket. He held a thermos in one hand. He wasn't moving. "Time's up, Arthur," Davis called out over the roar of the engines. "Move out of the way, or my guys are going to drag you out." Arthur took a slow sip from his thermos. "You're making a mistake, Davis. The only mistake I made was letting you stay this long." Davis sneered. He signaled the lead bulldozer to move forward. The massive machine lurched forward, its steel blades scraping against the pavement. Suddenly, 3 black SUVs pulled into the intersection, blocking the bulldozers completely. The doors opened in unison. Eleanor stepped out of the lead vehicle. She wasn't wearing her usual corporate blazer. She wore a heavy trench coat, and her face was absolute ice. Behind her were 4 people, carrying thick leather briefcases. They were the kind of lawyers who didn't argue in court. They ended companies before the trial even started. Davis frowned, lowering his coffee. "Hey, you can't park here. This is an active construction zone." Eleanor walked right up to Davis. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "Actually, Davis, this is an active crime scene." Davis let out a nervous chuckle. "Excuse me, who are you?" Eleanor handed him a thick stack of papers, with a bright red federal court seal stamped on the front. "I'm the person who just bought Vanguard Holdings' primary debt note," she said quietly. "And this is a federal emergency injunction." Davis stared at the paper, the color draining out of his face. "You falsified the geological surveys, Davis." Eleanor stepped closer, dropping her voice so only he could hear. "You were going to risk the foundation of a public school to save your quarterly bonus." Davis swallowed hard, his arrogant smirk completely gone. "Listen, lady, you don't understand the logistics of— I understand that the EPA, the city planner, and a federal prosecutor are all waiting for you at your downtown office right now." Eleanor didn't blink. "I suggest you get in your car." The bulldozer engines were cut off one by one as the operators realized what was happening. Davis looked at the lawyers, looked at Eleanor, and then looked past the fence at Arthur. He dropped the court order on the ground and walked quickly to his car, without saying another word. Eleanor watched him drive away. Then, she walked up to the fence. Arthur unlocked the gate and pushed it open. He looked at the idling SUVs, the lawyers, and then at Eleanor. "You didn't have to do that," Arthur said softly. "I had the real soil reports ready in my truck." Eleanor smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "I know you did, but some people need to learn that they can't just pave over whatever gets in their way." Arthur nodded slowly. "How's the kid?" "He asked about Barnaby this morning," she said, her voice catching just a little. "He wants to know if he can come back and help feed him tomorrow." "He can come by any time," Arthur said. "He's got a good throw." Eleanor looked around the quiet, green space, hidden in the middle of the concrete city. She had spent her whole life trying to build walls high enough to protect herself and her son. She thought strength meant having the most money, the biggest title, the loudest voice in the room. But standing there in the cold morning air, she finally understood what real strength looked like. It looked like a man who knew exactly what he was standing on and refused to move. If this story meant something to you today, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to leave your promise in the comments. Type, "I choose to stand my ground," because when good people stand firm, the bullies always lose. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.